not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, it's Daybreak on Trust Television. Is that segment where we bring you all the stories that made the newspaper headlines of major newspapers in Nigeria this morning. And as usual, we will begin with the Daily Trust. And so much is happening, and I'm sure Daily Trust did its best to bring you a snippet of all of the important stories in Nigeria this morning. Starting with the big one. CBN releases mopped up old notes to banks today. What a relief that is, I'm sure, to most Nigerians, as NLC threatens mass action. Despite 1 trillion in circulation, cash crunch persists, and rush for Ramadan shopping amidst Naira's scarcity price hike. You will find the details of this story on pages 4, and of course, starting with the front page. And 2 other stories on the front page, directly below the name marks, we have poultry industry faces total collapse after multiple shocks. You want to know what those shocks are? Pick up the Daily Trust and go to page 25. Buhari cautions against price hike as Ramadan begins today. You find that on page 6. And Barrow joins Senate presidency race, says, I am the most experienced once office zone to Northwest. 2 other stories, Atiku to tribunal, declare me president-elect or cancel polls. You'll find that on page 11. And governorship elections, LP wins Abia, PDP retains Enugu. FG to install facial recognition in airports across Nigeria. And the intrigues that led to the emergence of NNPP's Yusuf as Kano governor-elect. You want to get all the behind-the-scenes stories, you pick up the Daily Trust and open to page 3. And of course, we have there the front page picture of the co-founder Tony Elumelu Foundation, Dr. Awele Elumelu, and the founder, Tony Elumelu Foundation, Group Chairman of the United Bank for Africa, and celebrant, Mr. Tony Elumelu, as well as daughter Ego Elumelu, during the symposium held in commemoration of Mr. Elumelu's 60th birthday, attended by 60 young beneficiaries of the Tony Elumelu Foundation Entrepreneurship Program held at the UBA House in Marina yesterday. These are the major stories on the front page of the Daily Trust.
In 20 years, Peter Obi alters shape of Southeast politics. That's the banner headline on the Leadership newspaper this morning. And you see a pictorial there with an explainer underneath. PDP in total domination. And second enters Peter Obi with ABGA. Also, ABGA remains, but PPA in play. ABGA spreads, takes Imo, enters APC, and finally APC spreads to Ebonyi. Oh, and the last one, PDP near extinction. And a couple of riders underneath the banner headline. LP records first win in Abia governorship election. PDP slim win in Enugu takes party closer to extinction. And above the masthead, we see Sultan declares today first day of Ramadan. And other stories on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. Banks to get more old Naira notes from CBN today. Tinubu off to Paris, Saudi Arabia for vacation, Umrah. Also, Abba Kyari loses bid to stop trial for drug offenses. And finally, global banking turmoil. Nigerian banks need vigilance, proactiveness. And that's by Agora Policy. You can catch that story on page 7. And to get more, simply get a copy of the Leadership newspaper to keep updated.
And moving on to this Nigeria, with the stories to stay with the cash scarcity. Labour to shut down CBN offices next week, begins mobilization in states tomorrow. To other story, LPOT wins Abia governorship election as PDP takes Enugu. FG approves 453.90 billion for Kano Maradi rail ports. Places order for 25,000 metric tons of wheat from Ukraine and potassium from Russia. I take exception to Obi's comment that I worked against him, Wike. To other stories, Umahi, I will run if Senate presidency is zoned to the southeast. And Buhari wishes Muslim happy Ramadan. These are the major stories on the front page of This Nigeria.
And on First News, NLC declares nationwide strike over cash crunch fuel. FG states LG's share 722 billion federal allocation. We blocked 3.8 million cyber attacks during Guba polls. That's according to the federal government. And also, supporters trekking to Kano over my victory should stop. Governor-elect. And the very glaring headline on First News reads, we are compiling list of Nigerians who incited electoral violence, the UK government says. It says observation team witnessed vote buying, voter intimidation, destruction of electoral materials, harassment of journalists during Guba polls. Expresses concern over use of inflammatory ethno-religious language by politicians. Action against culprits to include denying them UK visas, imposing other sanctions. And below the belt, we see Sultan announces sighting of new moon, says Ramadan begins today. Land grabbing, police probe killing of 2 persons in Odogbolu community. Peter Obi ungrateful. I never worked against him, says Wike. Berates Ayu for failing to deliver Benue to the PDP. And that's it for the First newspaper this morning.
And moving on to Blueprint newspaper, staying with the Guba elections. Uneasy calm in Adamawa, LPOT wins Abia Mba emerges in Enugu, with the Riders 2019 scenario playing out, and I'm sure victory, Fintri. And to other stories, we are ready for rerun, APC. To other stories, Senate presidency. Sentiments apart, my ranking experience stands me out, and that is coming from Barrow. Like Kalu Musa Umahi joins race. Governors urges Obi Atiku to withdraw litigations against Tinubu. And to other stories, Nigeria-China trade drops by 37 billion, and FEC okays $984 million equipment maintenance for the Nigerian Railway Corporation. Nigeria may lose more jobs, revenue to interest rate hikes. That's coming from analysts. And to other stories, I would resolve Obalende prayer ground tussle in 2 weeks, Buhari. These are the major stories on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper.
And for The Guardian this morning, Atiku to tribunal, declare me winner or order rerun. A couple of riders underneath. LP's OT, PDP's Mba win Abia Enugu polls. Adamawa, INEC to conduct rerun in 69 polling units. Don't swear in Tinubu, Shatima, dirty cautions. And above that, we see NLC threatens strike as CBN orders banks to come for old notes. Catch that story on page 3. World leaders hail Elumelu's impact on Nigeria, African economy. Scientists link hormonal contraceptives with breast cancer. Ramadan fasting begins today. And also, we see healing can't happen without justice. Rhodes Viver replies Tinubu. Blame yourself for your defeat, PDP chieftain tells Nnamani. You can read that story on page 7 and also get the Guardian newspaper to get the rest of the headlines.
And we move on to the Punch Sport Extra. A bit of touch from the sporting arena this morning with the major stories. The returnees, former stars reigniting careers at the MPFL. Stars who had gone abroad and have returned to play for local clubs. You want full details of that, you look around. And to other stories, Guinea holds on the 23 team in Abuja. I think they played a goalless draw at the main bowl of the National Stadium. Eagles will feast on White Dogs, Bissau Guineas, and the Seaman dreams goals against the duties. To other stories, Iwobi refuses to make promise against duties. Ozil retires from football. Chelsea may terminate Auba's contract. Aubameyang, that is, and Giroud released with Mbappe's captain. Giroud pleased with Mbappe's captaincy. And to other stories, Alves' right wife after breakup, and Orban valuation raises to 9 million. These are the much we would bring you this morning. I have now joining us in the studio the editor-in-chief of Deadline newspaper, Malam Nasrul Lawal. Ramadan Karim, good morning.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Somehow the moon beat you to it. I know you would have preferred this was happening whilst you were with your family, but it's all good. We all woke up to this story of the central bank pledging to release cash amidst series of concerns that were raised, leading up to the LNC issuing a threat to picket the central bank premises starting from next week. How would you summarize all of the development that happened around this cash scarcity precisely yesterday?
Well, I think it's a reaction to the threat by the NLC, actually to picket the offices of the Central Bank of Nigeria, because I actually see this as a knee-jerk reaction, because if it was something that was planned, I expected them to have mentioned it at the end of the MPC. Meeting, because he used that opportunity to apologize to Nigerians for the problems we have been having with the electronic transaction and what have you. But you can see it's good that the NLC, whether it's only a threat or something that they intended to actually follow through, and especially the fact that we now have a new NLC president, and who will want to make his mark, actually, to show that there is a new person in town, probably
the new sheriff.
Yeah, to make his own mark. But I'm very happy that they are releasing the most of old notes, because I'm actually one of the people affected by the cash scarcity. And especially now that we are entering the month of Ramadan, honestly, without releasing the money back in circulation, it's going to be very difficult for so many people. So it's good that they are bringing it back, and I hope things will now become normal.
Okay, so my question is, the policy kick-started, or at least Nigerians began to feel the impact of the policy, towards the end of December last year till today. And the federal government gave a couple of reasons why it deemed it necessary to introduce the policy. Now, in all of this, what is your assessment in its entirety of the policy, its implementation up till today? That we're seeing the headline that banks can now return to the CBN to release, to get back its old Naira notes.
Well, I think it was not managed properly, especially the implementation aspect of it. If you look at the fact that there were so many reports, saying that the old notes have been destroyed, but now they are about releasing them. So it's like all they wanted to do was to stop politicians from using it to buy
induced vote
votes.
buying.
But then you can also see that the politicians have a way of
devise new means of
circumventing the process,
yes.
Because as far as you can see, they were sharing noodles, they were sharing spaghetti and what have you. So whatever you do, the politicians will still find a way or two. And as far as I'm concerned, I think the major most of the people affected are actually not the politicians. People that need this money to move on with their lives, like people that engage in small businesses, and then we also needed this money to be able to buy small things, which like you cannot go to a supermarket and start transferring 200 naira and what have you. And so many supermarkets actually charge more if you are engaging in transaction that is less than 500 naira. So it actually affected so many people. But like I said, the process of the implementation, I find it very somehow, because it's like they didn't think it through, because the way they went about it, they said they wanted to stop terrorists from kidnapping people. Bandits are now back. If you have been reading what's happening in Niger State and parts of Kaduna, Zamfara, and what have you, they are back in business. And the buying of votes that you also spoke about, politicians still had their way. The last report that the United Kingdom actually issued confirmed that there were cases of vote buying, intimidation, and what have you. So next time they are coming up with a policy like this, I think they should engage all the stakeholders so that they will see what they can do, to minimize all these problems. Because the problem with coming up with policies like this, once it fails, then it will affect future policies, because people will say, okay, if after all this while they will go back to accepting, the old money, then why should I even worry? It's just like the reflective tips. If you remember when the FRSC introduced them, they forced people to start using them, and then all of a sudden, it stopped. So it's likely to affect future policies.
So do we say the policy was a bad policy, or rather is a bad policy, or rather its implementation is what is faulty at this point? I mean, because when the policy was first introduced, we saw a lot of promise. Even Nigerians who at the end of the day were going to be directly affected by the policy in itself were enthusiastic to see how it was going to play out. Unfortunately, the question of whether Nigerians are better for it or not still remains to be answered. So is the policy in itself faulty, or its implementation faulty?
Well, for me, I think it's the implementation, because electronic transactions and I think it's a very good thing. But the way we went about, implementing it is the problem. And even with this, I don't see us going back to the era of cash transaction the way we used to.
I was going to ask, so will we be back to the old normal?
Honestly, I don't think we are going back, to not at the level we
surplus cash transactions.
So, as far as I can see, many Nigerians have now started the electronic transaction, and if not because of the problems you've been having with the networks, downtime and what have you, honestly, so many Nigerians may not want to go back to taking cash around, which is one of the things that the CBN actually said at the beginning of the implementation.
Okay, so moving on to other stories. We saw yesterday it came to declare that Atiku and of course Peter Obi have approached the tribunals in pursuit of what they call a stolen mandate. How do you see this move? They are doing this in the face of calls by governors to say, let us bury the hatchet and try to move forward. And I think the president-elect had also talked about healing, but there are also a counter-accusation around asking people to heal when in the face of injustice. What do you make of all of this, and how would you evaluate how the president-elect has behaved since winning this election? I mean, in terms of his approach, his utterances, and all in the face of what is going on.
Well, starting with the court case, that's what they filed at the tribunal. I find it difficult to understand what exactly they are asking for. Is it that they want to be given the mandate, or is it that they want the process to start all over again?
Exactly.
Because how can you go to court and without something specific? Because as far as I can see from the reports, that's the issue.
What it looks like.
Declare me president or cancel the votes. So which one are you after? Is it, if you are sincere and you think you actually won the election, why don't you make that argument and then try to present your evidence so that the court will now agree with you? And if you think, no, the process was bad,
flawed,
and then you also present your own case so that the courts will now go through it and see the best way to handle it. But you can see they are neither here nor there. And as far as I can see also, the president-elect, he has been saying all the right things. But, saying things is one thing, and then following it through is another. And of course, he is talking about national healing and what have you. But if it is something that you can liken to maybe a case of a patient going to the hospital, you can't stop a patient from seeing the doctor, simply because you think the ailment is not a serious one. It's for him to decide. And what the candidates do, or what they did actually, is something that the law allows. If you feel aggrieved, you can go to court. And this is better than actually taking to the streets, trying to maybe incite passion and what have you. Because even probably that's why the CBN was quick to try to stop the NLC protest, because this is something that can easily be hijacked. So many people are jobless, they are just there waiting for you to engage. So I think the president-elect has been saying the right things, and then all those who feel aggrieved should not be stopped from testing the law to see how far they can go.
Okay, so while it is well within their rights, I'm talking about the aggrieved candidates and their parties now, to seek legal address, regarding the outcome of the election. In the prayers of both candidates, the APC and the Labour Party, for instance, I've said the PDP rather. Yeah. For instance, the PDP and Atiku are saying, look, you either cancel the election and reconduct a fresh one where Atiku and Tinubu will be left to slug it out. That is on one part. Now, on the Labour Party side and Peter Obi's side, they are saying disqualify Tinubu, disqualify Shettima, and also prevent the APC from contesting in the fresh election that you are going to reconduct. So while they have the right to seek legal redress, do they now have the right to also tell the court or pray the court to disqualify candidates based on whatever grounds it is that they are providing at this time?
Well, I think it's only a prayer, and then the courts will now look at it and then decide. It's not just because they are making the argument, that the courts will decide the way they want it to go. Because maybe the Atiku is seeing maybe Peter Obi as his problem. Probably without Obi in the race, he may likely win the election. And then probably also Peter Obi was seeing Tinubu as his problem, and he wants him disqualified so that he can take on Atiku, believing that probably if it is Atiku, he may be able to have his way. So it's for them to make the argument, and then the courts also have their own methods, to go through the arguments that they are making and see which one can stand the rigors of the law, and the ones that they dismiss them, that's what they do.
Another dimension which we sort of touched the last time you were in the studio, resurfaced again with the Ministry of Digital Economy coming out to tell us the barrage of cyber attack that seem to have escorted this election. In total, we have about 16.8 million at the cyber attack. And one begins to wonder, are they just throwing out figures? Is this something we should interrogate further? Shouldn't we be worried as a people to think that there had been 16.8 million attempts at hacking into our election server? Should we be worried? Is this something we should probe further, or just be happy that we prevented that from happening and move on?
Yeah, you can see the fact that we are saying we prevented, all the attacks. They were only attempts. If they were actual attacks, then we will be talking about something entirely different. And the fact that, even the hackers attempted that should show you maybe the security of our online platforms and what have you. Because right now, most of the things that we are claiming to be, like the .ng and what have you, where are the servers located? They are hardly ever in Nigeria. Sometimes you engage foreigners to run this thing, and then it makes it easier for them to try to see what they can make out of it, because Nigerians, especially the politicians, are actually desperate. So there is nothing in this world that they will not try, if it will play to their advantage. But I will also want them to be transparent, rather than just bandying figures. They should try to engage. We have local experts, who can see actually what has been transpiring. So if they engage them, at least we'll now see what actually happened, rather than just giving us figures that do not mean anything as far as I am concerned.
Okay, so now let's go to the southeast now. Yesterday we got results for Abia and Enugu, states, and first of all, Labour Party won its first state in the conducted 2023 general elections, and the Enugu state also coming with the PDP in a narrowly contested election. So we are seeing that southeast is now divided across different parties, such that it's no longer the usual game of one party dominating the entire zone. What do you think this will translate into subsequently, especially because it used to be an area considered to be a vote bank for a particular political party, and now we are now seeing that trajectory change to something else?
Well, I'm happy that Labour was able to get at least a governor's seat in the southeast, because it's always good to have alternative platforms. There were so many candidates, who have been trying, but because they were looking at PDP and APC, they've not been able to make any mark. But now that you have alternative platforms, and the fact that our elections are improving, no matter the challenges, the circumstances, they are improving. At least, even in Kano, you can see what happened. A party that is very new, now has a governor in waiting. So it's always good to have this alternative platform, so that we don't end up with the dictatorship of only two parties. It's either PDP or APC. But now people can go to SDP and win election. They can go to YPP and win election. And this is what we should be happy that we are getting. But for people saying that maybe politicians in the southeast will be threatened by the rising profile of Peter Obi, I don't see it as such, because the fact that PDP was able to win, at least two governorship elections, that means the party still, it depends on who you are fielding. If your candidate is acceptable to the people, is credible enough, nothing stops him from winning. But like I said, it's good that we have now the platforms, and then if the process is credible and transparent enough, then whoever wins the election should...
So something critical came out of this election, and you have stated it in passing, but perhaps you could dwell a bit more on it, which is the sophistication of the voters. One of the patterns we also saw between the presidency and was basically wanting somebody from a platform and going all out for it. We saw in the Southeast, for instance, the Senate candidates in the same Abia state, where they had followed a candidate to Abga and returned for another party in another place, and a different party entirely for the governorship. Dito Enugu, the Senates were swept by a different party, and they remained with the governorship. If you come down to Nasarawa, we saw those coloration. What do you think this means for us as a people, especially with now putting the established parties on their toes to field candidates that are popular with the people or lose out entirely?
Yeah, it's very good. Like, so many people are even saying that in most of these states, like in Zamfara, in Kano, where the ruling parties, lost the election, that they failed to do the right thing. Even from the nomination process, they didn't allow the will of the people to actually prevail. So because of that, you ended up with somebody that the establishment wants against the one that the people actually. So once the people identify that, then they can also take their loyalty to allegiance to other places. And that's why I said it's very important to have a credible and transparent process, so that we'll have a level playing field. Whoever is in the race should know that, okay, he stands a chance, unless if the people decide otherwise. But the one that the sitting governor will be deciding, okay, you will go to Senate for governor, you will go for Senate, you know, as if we are
so
sharing.
Those times have changed.
So times have changed. And with technology, and then if we begin to see less of human involvement in all the processes, believe me, our elections will improve greatly, because right now the problem we are having is the involvement of the human part of it. That's where we are having, you know, the ones that will want to change manually.
All right, like Nasir Lawal, the editor-in-chief of Dateline Nigeria, thank you so much for your informed perspectives and analysis as we review the papers this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, we will now go on a quick break and return at the top of the hour with more for you on Daybreak. Do stay.
When a situation where you find that a look at the
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
I have said that